When you go silent, the narcissist doesn't feel peace. They feel panic because silence, your silence, is the one thing they can't control, manipulate, or twist. If you've ever wondered what goes on in their mind day by day when you stop feeding their ego, stay with me. What they think will shock you. If this is already hitting home, pause for a moment. Breathe. You're not imagining their reactions. You're not overthinking your silence. You are reclaiming your power. And the more you understand how they operate, the more control you regain over your own life. So stay with me. Day 1 is where the real psychological impact of your silence begins. And it hits the narcissist harder than anything you've ever said to them. The moment you stop responding, they don't interpret it the way a healthy person would. They don't think, maybe they need space, or maybe something happened. Instead, their mind immediately snaps to one thing: ego panic. Your silence is not neutral to them. It's an insult, a threat, and a challenge to the image they hold of themselves. They're used to you reacting, explaining, defending, clarifying, or soothing. When all of that disappears, they feel the ground shift beneath them. They experience a sudden loss of control. Control is their oxygen. Without it, they choke. On this first day, they run through every predictable thought. They won't last. They always come back. They need me more than I need them. These thoughts aren't based on truth. They're based on the fantasy world they've built, where they are the center and everyone else revolves around them. Your silence cracks that world. A crack that brings fear, but they disguise that fear with arrogance. They convince themselves you're playing a game and they're still winning. They may even smirk at the idea that you're trying to get a reaction out of them because, in their mind, you're incapable of detaching. But beneath the arrogance is restlessness. They can't sit still. They check their phone more than usual. They scroll through old chats looking for signs that you're still orbiting them. They might even replay old voice notes or memories. Not because they miss you, but because they're trying to reassure their ego that they still matter, that they're still in control. Your silence introduces the one thing they cannot handle: unpredictability. They don't know what you're thinking, planning, or what's coming next. That mental chaos is torture for them. And even on day 1, the cracks in their confidence already start to show. The silence begins to settle in, and the narcissist begins to feel something they don't like to admit: withdrawal. Not emotional withdrawal, but control withdrawal. They depended on your reactions far more than you realized. Your responses, even irritated ones, kept them alive. They fed off your attention, explanations, attempts to fix things, your desire to salvage the relationship. When all of that suddenly disappears, they feel it like an addict feels the absence of their drug. Restless, distracted, and oddly hyper-focused on you, they start checking for signs that you might cave. Did you view their story? Did you post something sad? Did you accidentally like something? They're looking for proof that you're still within their reach. Their mind shifts into analysis mode. They reread your last messages and interpret your silence as a strategy, not a boundary. They think they're doing this to get attention because that's how they function. They assume your silence is a performance, not a decision. They imagine how long you'll last, convinced you won't be able to maintain it. Every hour without a message from you adds irritation to their ego. They won't admit this irritation to anyone. They might act colder, louder, or more distant on the outside, pretending they don't care. But internally, they're running mental laps, trying to figure out why you're not responding as they predicted. This is also the day they become surveillance experts. They monitor your online activity like a mission, checking timestamps, profile changes, status updates, anything that indicates you're still aware of them. But the real fear building inside is simple. What if you're not checking at all? What if your silence isn't a game? What if they actually lost their grip on you? Day 3. The narcissist's ego begins scrambling for protection. Your silence has now lasted long enough to make them uncomfortable. They start rewriting the story in their favor. They can't accept that you stepped back because you're exhausted, hurt, or finally done. That truth is too threatening. Instead, they create narratives to soothe their ego and restore their sense of superiority. They tell themselves you're being dramatic, or that you're too emotional, too attached, or too invested to stay silent for long. In their mind, this isn't a boundary, it's a strategy for attention. They believe you're still orbiting them even if you're not speaking. They craft fantasies where you're thinking about them constantly, checking your phone, waiting for them to reach out. They may even imagine scenarios where you return, apologizing or explaining yourself. This isn't delusion for delusion's sake. It's self-preservation. Their ego can't accept the idea that someone might disconnect without their permission. They may also begin rewriting the story to see themselves as the victim. They think, I didn't do anything wrong, or they're overreacting, or they're trying to manipulate me. This victim mentality shields them from responsibility. Blame becomes their armor. While rewriting these stories, they also monitor you more intensely, wanting every piece of information that confirms their narrative. If you're quiet, they'll say you're sulking. If you're active online, they'll say you're seeking attention. If you post something positive, they'll insist you're pretending. No matter what, they twist everything to keep themselves safe from accountability. Day 4. The fantasy grows stronger because facing reality would mean admitting they're losing control. This day, their inner world shifts from denial into irritation, and that quickly turns into anger. Your silence, which they first dismissed or tried to explain away, now becomes a perceived insult. It wounds their ego in a way they can't tolerate. When their ego is injured, the reaction isn't sadness or reflection but rage. Quiet or loud, but rage nonetheless. They begin devaluing you to regain a sense of power, telling themselves you were never that special or important. They run through every flaw, mistake, or moment of vulnerability, using mental devaluation to shrink you so they can feel big again. In their mind, if they convince themselves you weren't valuable, losing your attention doesn't matter. Yet, the harsher their internal dialogue, the more threatened they actually feel. They might outwardly behave cold or careless, posting on social media, acting happier, or pretending to have moved on, but beneath it all, they want you to see it. They want you to feel small and react. Your silence removes their access to your emotions, intensifying their anger. Inside, they wrestle with a bigger fear. If you can stay silent this long, maybe you're slipping away. They won't admit this even to themselves, so they bury it under arrogance, insults, and imaginary superiority. Day 5. The narcissist's internal panic begins to leak through. Up until now, they've attempted to control the narrative with confidence, denial, and anger. But now your silence has lasted longer than expected and something shifts inside them. They start to worry. Not about losing you as a person, but about losing what you provided. Attention, validation, emotional labor, stability, admiration, the feeling of being important. You were a source of supply and now that source has gone quiet. That's when scarcity kicks in. Behind closed doors, they wonder who will fill the gap. Someone to listen, react, admire, or soothe their ego. Without that, they feel empty, bored, restless, and irritated. They scan their surroundings for potential replacements. Old flings, friends, online contacts. Anyone who can give them the attention they crave. Even as they do this, they can't ignore the discomfort your silence causes. It's like an itch they can't scratch. A reminder that something is slipping out of their control. Their thoughts become scattered and inconsistent. They're insignificant. Why haven't they broken yet? Are they moving on? Is someone else giving them the validation I used to? These thoughts terrify them. The fear, mixed with insecurity, drives them to overthink your silence more than they expected. They won't reach out yet because pride still blocks them, but deep inside they're watching, waiting, calculating. For the first time, the possibility that they are losing their grip on you becomes real. Day 6. The narcissist's panic turns into strategy. Your silence has lasted long enough to unsettle and irritate them, forcing them to question their perceived power. They are no longer just uncomfortable, they feel threatened. When threatened, they don't self-reflect or apologize. Instead, they switch into testing mode. They want to know, do I still have access to them? Their mind becomes tactical. They plan small, low-risk ways to get your attention without fully exposing their ego. They won't send something vulnerable or direct yet. Instead, they send tiny signals. A like on an old picture, a reaction to a story, a one-word message, a question mark, a meme, a song lyric. Something that looks accidental but is very intentional. These micro breadcrumbs are their way of knocking on the door without admitting they want back in. They measure your response. Immediately, slowly, angrily, emotionally, anything. Any reaction reassures them their supply isn't gone. Silence, however, signals the opposite. You're slipping out of their control. Inside, they're restless, annoyed, and deeply curious. They imagine how you'll react to their attempt and prepare excuses. It was a mistake. I didn't mean to send that. Just checking something. These protect their ego, helping them pretend they weren't reaching out on purpose. But behind the scenes, that tiny action is a huge admission. They can't fully tolerate your silence anymore. Day 7. The fear beneath the narcissist's bravado surfaces. Up until now, they've cycled through shock, denial, ego stories, anger, and testing. Now something darker emerges. The fear of exposure. Your silence has lasted long enough that they can no longer predict, read, or control your reactions. This unpredictability threatens them more than anything else. They start thinking, what if I've been figured out? This idea that you may finally see who they really are terrifies them. They re-examine past moments, scanning for slips, reveals, or oversteps. Narcissists rely on confusion, distraction, and emotional fog to maintain control. Silence, however, clears that fog. It gives you space to think, connect dots they hoped you'd never connect. And on day 7 they sense this shift. They fear you're no longer under their spell. Another fear, what if you're telling others? Their reputation, their carefully crafted persona, is everything. The thought that you might disclose their behavior frightens them deeply. Your silence signals withdrawal of emotional energy. When that happens, they often start seeing things more clearly. Once the fog lifts, their behavior becomes undeniable. They worry silently, may act cold, confident, or unaffected outwardly, but inside they're restless, pacing, overthinking. They don't know whether your silence means you've moved on, are done for good, or have finally recognized their patterns. That uncertainty is torture. Day 8. The narcissist's desperation begins to collide with their pride, creating a mental storm they can't hide. Your silence has lasted long enough that it can't be dismissed as a phase or tactic. Now it feels real, like distance. And distance for a narcissist is danger. Distance means you're thinking clearly, not reacting, slipping out of their emotional cage. Their thoughts swing between delusional confidence, they always come back, and fear, what if they're actually done? They hate these thoughts because they expose the one thing they don't want to admit. You mattered more than they ever let on. This day they start preparing for a return on their terms. They rehearse messages, something casual, funny, unbothered, yet underneath they seek proof of your response. They won't send anything yet, pride still blocks them. Instead they gather information, lurking, checking social media, decoding your silence. They wonder if you're healing, waking up, or recognizing the cycle. Deep down they know something is happening they cannot reverse. Your mind is clearing, your emotions settling, your perspective sharpening. Their biggest fear becomes undeniable. Your silence is changing you and they can't control who you're becoming.